All right. All right. So yeah, thanks all for participating. So this is just a recap of the whole event. So to explain how we got here, we should start with the timeline. So back in spring 2017 is when I did this puzzle hunt called CS50X. And it's a very similar format, 8 puzzles, the answer is like one word, and this is what inspired everything that follows. So in summer 2017, I made my first puzzle hunt for a couple of friends. That didn't go very far, but that was just like some random ideas that just I threw together. And then when I realized that AA liked puzzles, I put the first one together in spring 2019, which was a pretty big hit. And the following year, I made it an official competition like between like the classes. And now we have the one that just happened, spring 2021. And you might be wondering, like, what about the one in spring 2022? Well, I've actually decided to end it as a trilogy. Like, I've made a bunch of like adaptations, like from year to year. But yeah, like just thinking ahead, I figured that like I might as well change the formula. So I will be doing something. It just won't be a puzzle hunt. Right now, I'm thinking like something like an alternate reality game or an escape room. More details will be available closer, but yeah, it won't be a puzzle hunt, something of a different formula. And yeah, so here are the teams. We got the first team, which is mmbernie. It was most of the juniors and then some sophomores. And we also got Massive, which is the seniors plus some other sophomores as well. All right, so here's the recap part of the presentation. So we had some chaos since day zero, and the team that came to be mmbernie had a lot of trouble deciding what their team name was going to be until Christiana just said, "Yo, let's just name ourselves Bernie Sanders," and then Leah went off with all the nicknames. And the other chat was a bit confused what they were doing. Like it was chaotic, and so it was like, yeah, well, what are they doing over there? And yeah, Simon thought it was a public health group chat at first, and yeah, so it was off to the races pretty fast. I released the puzzles a bit early. She thought it was supposed, Christiana thought it was supposed to release at 9, and I said, well, Christmas came early. And Christiana absolutely went off on day zero, solving 5 out of the 8 puzzles. And that Team Massive had a lot of team spirit. Harmony's goal was to beat Linda. Allison's we found out that Allison's last name was actually Brain, and her middle name was Massive or Gargantuan. And Nikki said that if anyone figured out the IKEA one, that she would love him forever. I think that is still open. She can correct me if I'm wrong. And she says that the love will be completely conditional. Emma and Bernie also had a lot of team spirit to match that. Yep. So this was the last Friday's ALGAE. Emma and Bernie's team was pretty hyped up. Albert was also on Emma and Bernie's team, so he was also part of that. And of course, competition is a big part of it. For number 6, there was something about like it was somewhat related to chem, and Josephine was asking if the other chem people solved it. So we had some unique ideas, with one of them being Nikki asking, "Are they all gay?" For number 8, she thought it was a pride puzzle. And so for number 6, if you guys remember, at some point you get this message, "Girl below on feet." Leah thought it might have been a joke about Emma, which was not the case. And at one point, Allison thought like some letters looked closely like to defense. But yeah, no, I just think that's too much Valorant. And we got some pretty close attempts. This was last Friday when everyone was like working on number 6. So Callum was saying, "Oh, did you hear us saying resting instead of resting?" Harmony was very close. She wrote down cement pronoun when it's supposed to be pronoun cement or pronouncement. And Christiana got triggered by 4. All right, and now, like it's understandable that like people got a little bit frustrated that like they weren't quite getting the answer as fast as they hoped. So some people tried to game the system. Jen was like, "Oh no, let's just try to get Matt to tell us what's left." But then she realized like, "Oh, that I think that would actually hurt Christian's sense of accomplishment. So let's actually not do that." And then Nikki um, wanted to start giving me threats until she got the answer, but luckily she didn't quite do that. And yeah, at some point, got a little bit impatient. I don't quite blame you guys, but there was one occasion when I was asked for a hint, and I was in the shower. Literally 5 minutes after I got out of the shower, I responded, and Nikki's like, "Hurry up! We don't have time for this tomfoolery." Yeah. Anyways, yeah. So mmbernie also had some shenanigans, and it was about this time when I made the promise that if they got a full score without using any hints, then I'll actually buy them prizes. Because I realized like they were like going off, like Christiana and like them, they were solving them super fast. And yeah, at one point they were considering putting on Twitch, so we would get those AACF Puzzle Hunt 100% true ending speed run attempts. And no contact needed for this, but Josephine made a joke and Linda was completely silent. And at some point, we found out that Christiana was a little bit addicted to the puzzles. Um, Also, at another point, we were very close. Christiana could feel it in her jellies. You'll have to ask her for the meaning of that one. We're not quite sure about what that means. At one point, Christiana told everyone else that they could get started first, and Joey pointed out that this was highly not in character for Christiana slash Bernie. And at one point, Christiana said her brain was dead, and to which I told her to sleep, or else you might see that MM1 was slain by zombie. And of course, we have the Hall of Fame. We have this every year. Our first person was Harm, who said, well, what do we do if I don't remember my username and password? And to that I replied, which is aligned with tradition, if you forget your password, I will change it to CK soon. But it turned out that Harm didn't realize that like these accounts were different from last year's. So she's not quite the first person to join the Hall of Fame. And then we had Allison, who forgot her password and told me to change it to CK soon. But after I did that, it turned out that she just forgot her username. So she's not quite the first person either. Not pictured here, but the first person was actually Albert, who forgot. Someone who is pictured here is Jen, who is the second and last member to join the Hall of Fame, who forgot their password. And it was reset to CK soon. All right, so here's some statistics. It's not too interesting since there's only two teams, but basically both teams got all the base points. All of the puzzles were eventually solved. And yeah, we had 22 people registered, which is pretty good. And so this is the statistics for the accuracy rates. So we had 28 right submissions and 245 wrong submissions. That's about around a 90% fail rate. And you compare that to last year, and so last year's had 5 teams, and there was more wrong submissions, but it looks like the percent of wrong submissions is a little bit higher this year. All right, so now we have some interesting submissions. For number 6, Christiana entered Creeper. I'm not quite too sure about that one. Maybe it like that the data matrix looked kind of like a creeper, but you have to ask her about that one. Christiana also entered Band Dog for number 1. She said that she was trying to identify the breed of dog in the picture. I'm not quite sure what a Band Dog is. For number 5, Nikki entered Meatballs, probably because it was related to IKEA, but that's not quite the answer. We also got Guacamole, followed by Salsa and 7-Layer, and Reddit and GameStop eventually. All right, so now we also got Jesus from Josephine. because Jesus is the answer to everything except puzzles, apparently. And then we also got anime from Nikki on number 8. So it's safe to say that we had the power of God and anime on our side for this puzzle competition. We also got some somewhat Avatar-related answers, and then that resulted in pun somehow. Josephine started thinking about mRNA and vaccines for number 9, and eventually coronavirus. And then she also tried simplex, which was actually kind of funny since I almost made the answer to number 9 simplex, but I knew someone would guess that, so I chose a better, more meaningful word. And she also tried entering my name, which would have been really funny to put my own name as the answer. Maybe I'll try that in the future. Then we have some more funny ones here. So Sam entered cancer for number 8. So I was a little confused here. I actually thought that he was like thinking about like astrology signs and like cancer, but other people have told me it's probably just him thinking that the puzzle was cancer. So Josephine also submitted this. I'm not going to read it out, but I think that kind of shows her sentiments towards number 9 at some point. And yeah, she even more explicitly said, what and this erg. And this is one of my favorites from Nikki, who said, Matt, I swear the answer is supposed to review. Please, the weekend ends today. I just want to go to bed. And seeing those submissions, it should not come as a surprise that the person with the most failed answer attempts is Josephine, with 3.64% solve rate, 53 fails. And for the other team, pretty close. It was Nikki with 45 fails and 3 solves. So I actually don't have enough survey responses yet, so I might release like some stats on that later. The surveys in the group chat I sent out like a little bit late, so like that's probably why there's less responses. But yeah. So moving on to the final scores. This is what the raw scoreboard looked like. It was incredibly close when you look at like the time of submissions. So like, for example, number 3 was the first puzzle solved, and that was by Nikki within the first 10 minutes of the competition. And then 5 minutes later, Christiana solved it. And at the very end, number 9, mmbernie's team solved it, and within 10 minutes, the other team solved it. So it was like super intense just watching like this from the bird's eye view from both teams. All right, so now in terms of the final rankings, we do have in second place Massive with a score of 1,180. And first place, it was mmbernie with the perfect score of 1,280 without any hints. So yeah, congrats to mmbernie for that. And I will be thinking about prizes within the next year. I'm not going to ship prizes. That's way too expensive. So it'll be like whenever I get back. But yeah. And then, so the score sheet can be found here. For reference, Massive used 4 hints. They're detailed here. And then I also put together a solutions PDF. But I'll also go over the solutions briefly now, which will be coming up next. So number 1 was the matrix. Development for this one started actually after the semester started. So I'll give a little bit more context. So usually, or like I guess in the previous years, I did all of my development in like that summer period. But for this summer, or like this past development cycle, it was a bit slower. I do have to say, like, COVID is like kind of whack with creativity. So some of these were made like a little bit later. But yeah, so this is what it looked like. And the answer was that you see this dog in like the bottom here. So if you tilt your head to look at the dog, then you'll actually see like all of these symbols are like a bunch of letters, except they're like duplicated 4 times and then rotated like 90 degrees. And so that's how you get the answer, which is click. And the pun here is that like click is like sounds like click, as in this is a computer and like you're clicking on it. So yeah. The next one is the Waterbending Scroll, and this one was made in summer 2020. It was made after I binged Atla in 10 days, took a break, took a 1 week break, and then watched all of Atla again, then The Legend of Korra. But that's kind of irrelevant. I just was very inspired to make an Atla related puzzle. I actually reached out to my cousin to get this drawn since I don't have art skills. I tried drawing this out. Actually, I sketched this out like on paper at first, but it didn't look too good. So I was like, I should probably get this more professionally done. So this is what it looked like. And the main, or the key thing here was to see dancing men in the haiku. And when you Google dancing men, something like this will show up where it's a cipher from Sherlock, actually, where like depending on like the pose of the people, that corresponds to a letter. So when you use that to like decode based on like the position of like their arms and feet, it spells out lunar, which makes sense because waterbending is dependent on the moon from Atla. All right, so now we have number 3, which is nicknames, and this was made very late. This was made actually like a few weeks ago. One of the last ones I put together, and this was meant to be the warm-up. This is like an easy one meant for like people with like less experience. And I guess what I didn't quite realize was that when I put an easy one in, the optimal policy will, or the optimal strategy would be for the most experienced people to solve it within the first 15 minutes, which is exactly what happened. Which is completely fine, but that's just wasn't quite the intent. And they probably realized that this was a little bit easier than like the past puzzles, but yeah, so that's why it was easier. So it looks like this. It's a Zoom-based or a Zoom-themed puzzle, and or the haiku talks about wind symphony class, which leads you to trumpet and then trump. And this is when you realize that these are all Trump nicknames, and this is taken from Wikipedia. So when you use that, you plug it all in, you get all of these shown here, and then from the puzzle, it tells you like what letters to extract. And when you do that, it spells out sobriquet. And that means, or sobriquet means nickname, which makes sense in the context of the puzzle. All right, and then for number 4, Grapheme Fun. This concept was actually made before last year's Puzzle Hunt. It was made in like December, basically last winter break, and I'd already had all 8 done for 2020, so I was like, oh, well, I'll just use this for the future. And yeah, so this is what it looked like. There was actually a older version which looked like this. It's similar concept. I just used a line and like if it was above or below the line to distinguish between like the two classes or the two classifications. And the second part was a bit different. It was more linguistics related, where it was like if you needed to like have your lips touch or like your tongue touch the roof of your mouth when you say the letters. But I scrapped that because it was a bit like ambiguous for some characters. And yeah, so for stage 1, you were supposed to classify letters that had straight lines or rounded edges. And this is hinted by the shapes, because the square has straight lines and the circle has rounded edges. When you do that, it spells out Eulerian path letters. And for those of you who aren't quite familiar with what that means, basically it's just saying letters that can be made with one stroke. So in stage 2, you want to classify ones that have an Eulerian path and ones that don't. And then that spells out digraph. So one thing to note is that a grapheme is the smallest functional unit in a language. And so the title is kind of a pun, because like Grapheme Fun sounds like graphing, and the answer is digraph. And digraph is actually a combination of 2 letters representing one sound, but it also has another meaning, that a digraph is a directed graph, which will be helpful later. So for number 5, Hammer Time, this was created in the summer of 2020. And this is what it looked like. So the blue and gold signage hints to the IKEA logo, and assembly required leads to like do-it-yourself furniture. And so when you look all these up, you'll notice that like they're off by 1 letter. And when you extract that letter, it spells out count type. So it's telling you to count the types, or like group by the types and then count how many are of each in the order that are shown here. And when you do that, you get MINDE or MINDI, but you're not quite done yet. You want to look that up, and when you look that up on IKEA's catalog, it shows up as mir. So basically, the puzzle is asking, what are you trying to buy? So the answer is mir. That's what you're trying to purchase. For number 6, this one was one of my favorites. It was made in summer 2020. This one worked very well for collaboration. All the teams did it at the ALGAE last week. And this was actually inspired from an older problem on a computational linguistics competition. I think it was in 2017. So the haiku mentions Amelia. And if you search up Amelia, then it'll show up as Amelia Bedelia, which is a children's book. And Amelia interprets clues literally. So that's the point here. You might have noticed that a lot of the clues are pretty jank. And that's because they're really you want to break the clue into 2 phrases to make a word that's different. So for example, the first one is to remove, and then the second phrase would be pennies. So pennies is cent, to remove is D, so it's decent or decent. One of my favorite ones is the Northern Alkid protagonist of Earthbound. So the first phrase is the Northern Alkid, which is Puffin, and protagonist of Earthbound, which is Ness. So you put it together and you have Puffiness. And so that's the first half. This is the second half. Then once you do that, it tells you to shade all these letters here. And so you're going to do that, and you get something that looks like this. So this is a 2D data matrix, and then when you scan it, it shows girl below on feet. And at this point, you want to do the whole puzzle again, where you think what have I done so far? Which is interpret each thing literally, and that's what you want to do again. So it's girl, which goes to miss, below, which goes to under, and on feet, which goes to stand. So the answer is misunderstand. So for the 7th one, this one is called Space Time. This one was made in the beginning of fall 2020. And this was inspired by me watching a video about 5D chess with multiverse time travel. It's a game on Steam, by the way. And originally it has 5 dimensions. Mine only had 4 in the puzzle. The 5th dimension being parallel dimensions. I didn't want to overcomplicate it, so I was like, let's not have the parallel dimensions. Let's only do time travel. So the whole premise is that the white pieces can time travel, and the pieces can only move in the present. And the goal was to generalize 2D chess rules. So for example, when you have rooks in a 2D, they can only move in one direction for n squares until they're obstructed. But if you generalize that, they can move n squares in exactly one spatiotemporal dimension. So I've kind of illustrated some examples here. So for the bishops, they move diagonally in n squares for 2 dimensions. When you generalize that, they move in n squares in exactly 2 spatiotemporal dimensions. It has to be n squares in both dimensions. And then for knights, you might think of it as an L shape in 2 dimensions, but if you generalize that, that's really just 1 square in 1 dimension and 2 squares in a different dimension. And then for the pawns, that's a typo. They move forward, but generalized, they move 1 square in 1 dimension or 1 square in 2 dimensions if they're capturing. So this is what it looks like when you highlight all of the characters or all of the pieces that can be captured, and then the puzzle tells you in which order to read it off, which is least recent to most recent and highest to lowest point value of the pieces. And when you do that, you spell out manifold. And a manifold is a space that locally resembles Euclidean space, which makes sense with the puzzle because we're treating time as a dimension that we can traverse. All right, so number 8 was called Azure Dreams. This concept was made in my head like long before the 2020 Puzzle Hunt, and it looked like this. Originally, it had a third part, but that just made it like way too confusing, so I ended up cutting it pretty late. Actually, like it was like a few weeks before it actually started. I'm not gonna say what that is since I might use that in the future. But yeah, so so also originally I only gave the first or the initial of the first name and then the last name. That was too hard. That was my bad. This puzzle was not exactly tested very much since it was like seen as the hardest one for like the beta testers, so they just never got to it. But yeah, so once you like search up the full names, you'll notice that like each one has a U.S. airport that's associated with it, and you're gonna fill in the three-letter airport codes over here. And when you read that in rainbow order, it spells out astral. And astral means like resembling the stars. So what you want to do is plot all of these on a map. And yeah, so then when you think about like what it could be, you want to think of the constellations. And this resembles Libra. So someone actually was like, oh, like there's no way like Matt could have like made it work with both like the three-letter code for the clues and actually like geographically work on a map. No, I assure you, I actually plotted over 100 airports on the map to see which ones would like make the shape, as well as like work with the three-letter codes for like the earlier part. And the whole point of like the Azure Dreams is like Azure is like blue, right? It's like that's like the sky. And there's something like the sky is the limit, but like that's not actually true because like there's space beyond that. So it's like a deeper blue. So yeah, so answer is Libra, and the sky, in fact, is not the limit. All right, so now number 9. So this one was made very late. Actually, you might have noticed this arrow is beyond the starting point of this year's Puzzle Hunt, and that's because I actually edited this like literally like on Saturday after it released. I realized that like this would be like the last puzzle, like the finale, so I figured like this one's gotta be like the best thing I've ever done. And before it was like not that complicated, and I was like, I can do a little better than that. So this is what it looked like. A little bit less of an effort to conceal it than last year's. Last year's involved like increasing the contrast to like see stuff, but I just like left this with the blanks here. Yeah, so of course, by tradition, I don't acknowledge that there is a 9th puzzle until you get there. But yeah, like when you look at these, basically they're kind of like puns. So like there's like the word benevolent as given as an example, and I'm saying yes or thanks, that is very kind. So it's like kind of like literal. So like the first one is bargain, thanks, that means a great deal. The second one is earth, thanks, that means the world. The one after that is infinity, thanks, that means more than you can possibly imagine. The one after that is plethora, thanks, that means a lot. And then my personal favorite, water pit, thanks, I know you mean well. Yeah, and then people started to get the point. Nikki said, you're killing me, and Christian said, thanks, that is life-changing. You have another example, flame, and thanks, that's pretty fire. And so the second part of the first stage was to read this vertically. A lot of teams were like looking at each word and like trying to understand what that could clue to. But I wanted to do something like different from last year. So I just made it so that when you read off the first letters, like vertically it says tech / and combining this with the previous part, it's telling you to go to puzzlehunt.tech/review because tech is the domain, or it's the last part of the URL for my website. So when you go to that, it says the end of the trilogy, and you see something like this. So at this point, you want to use all the previous answers and think about what they mean. So for click, in graph theory, as like a second definition, a click is a subset of vertices for an undirected graph. Lunar, as like references the moon, so that's a celestial body. Sobriquet means a nickname, which is like a similar version but not identical. Digraph is a directed graph by definition. a mirror produces a flipped version, which is a similar version but not identical. Misunderstand can be decomposed into 3 words: miss, under, and stand. Manifold can be decomposed into 3 words: man, I, fold. And Libra references stars, which are celestial bodies. So then you fill that out, but you realize that there's a slash there, so we need to go to each one. So when you get to graphs, this is what it looks like. So you want to remove the vertices that have a cycle. So there's a cycle from 6, 2, 3, 5. You remove those and you get 4, 1, 7. And then you convert that's like 1 to A, because like A is like the first letter and so on. And you get D, A, G, which if you look it up, that stands for directed acyclic graph, which makes sense in the context because when you remove cycles, you're left with something that's acyclic. Then you have celestial, which had this listed out. And this is basically just all the planets like first letters, like Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn. And the question mark refers to what comes before Mercury, which is the sun. And then identical says puzzle number 8. What do both involve? 2020's number 8 involved Pokemon on a map. 2021's number 8 involved airports on a US map. So the answer here is map. And then for decomposed, it says 3 three-word titles, and then gives this. So you want to look at the previous puzzle titles. In 2019, we had number 4, which said A Strange Inscription. In 2019, we also had number 8, which is Shorter is Better. In 2021, number 2 was the Waterbending Scroll. And then using this as the word and this as the which letter in that word, you get try. And this makes sense because the whole thing about 3, it can be decomposed into 3 words. This is 3 words, and try means 3. So then you get to here. You also notice that all of these are 3-letter answers for each sub-step, and that's because this is the end of a trilogy. The trilogy being the 3 puzzle hunts that I posted. Then you get to the final step, which looks like this. And yeah, this is one of my favorite like puzzle mechanics because the mechanic to solve this, you've actually seen like before the puzzle hunt even started, which is in fact overlaying the logo. You have to do it somewhat precisely. Like doing it like this, like Allison would work, but just sketching it would not work. That this would not be precise enough. And yeah, so once you do that, one thing to note is that the puzzle logo has like 2 squares that are like interlocked within each other, and that makes 8 like vertices or like corners. And the 8 represents the whole like the thing where like each puzzle has like 8 puzzles. And yeah, so when you read this clockwise, it says ANS for answer. To let you know that the answer is PAEAN. And this is actually an English word if you didn't know. And it means a song that is expressing triumph or thanksgiving. And it makes sense because it's a song of triumph because you guys, or the teams, have solved all the puzzles for like this puzzle hunt. And it's a song of thanksgiving because it's me thanking you all for playing. And yeah, so that's the end of the puzzle hunt. I hope you all enjoyed. It was definitely a pleasure to host this. And yeah, you can find the whole scores and solutions here and a blank packet here. And yeah, I will pass it on to David, I think, to run the spelling bee.